Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the Empower Me to Be Clutter-Free presentation. My name is Atina Rozon, and I will be guiding you through today's program. Clutter. This is probably something we've all heard about. We've all probably seen clutter. Let's talk about a definition for clutter. Clutter is a disordered collection that impedes movement and reduces effectiveness. It's probably also something that you can recognize when you see it. It's probably something that you can see someone else's clutter before you actually see your own clutter. Hopefully through today's program, we're going to assist all of you in understanding what clutter is and how maybe to eliminate clutter. So let's start off by taking a little quiz. Do you have clutter? As I said earlier, you probably can see the clutter in other people's areas, but do you actually have clutter? So take a little quiz with me. Let's go over some of these questions. Do you have friends that think you are disorganized? You don't have time to get organized. Do you spend a lot of time looking for things? Do you have that pile of mail that just keeps growing? Perhaps you're saving things because, you never know when you might need it later. Perhaps it's you just don't have any time for yourself. Do you feel guilty about throwing things away? What about if you have a visitor come? Do you have that sense of an embarrassment when a visitor arrives? All of these might be an indication that you might have some clutter. So today we're going to discuss the negative effects that come with clutter, some common barriers that we have when it comes to being organized and having that clutter. And then we're going to hopefully leave you with some strategies that you can become clutter-free. As we said in the title of our program, empowering you to be clutter-free. And part of that is to develop an action plan, something that you can put in place to help you overcome the clutter that you may have in your life. So we're going to start off by talking about some negative effects. These negative effects can include many things, anything from time related, financial related, safety, mental and emotional costs. When we think about time, when we have a lot of clutter in our life, it's going to take us longer to find things. As we mentioned in that quiz, are you always looking for things? Can you not find what you're looking for? It's also going to take longer to clean. And that might be something you might want to think about for a second. If you're just moving things around, are you actually cleaning in any respect? It's going to maybe take time because if you can't find something that you do have and you go maybe to the store to replace it, that's time that you have lost. And as we know, time is money. And so that time that we lose is also going to have a negative impact in a financial world. It's going to be expensive to replace the things that you can't find. And you're going to end up purchasing more. You're going to have duplicate items. It's also potential that you're going to have a cost related to storing the items. If it takes up, after a while, if you've got so much clutter and you keep accumulating, maybe not replacement items, but just more stuff, you may get to a point that you either maybe have to build on a storage area or you decide to maybe rent a storage unit for all of your stuff that you have. And again, being disorganized, it can have an effect on your finances in terms that you might not realize that you have bills that you need to be paying. You may end up with late fees. Being disorganized can also lead into identity theft. So it's really one of these things that we want to think about how safety can become an issue when we're thinking about being clutter or having a lot of clutter in our life. Not only from that financial standpoint, from a theft issue, but also a safety of your own personal safety, like having trip hazards. If you've got a lot of stuff just laying around, you may start tripping over things and can lead to falls. It may mean that you don't want to go out and buy a new tool that you are needing, and so you decide, well, I'll just use this in place of, whatever tool maybe that you're needing, and really that's not the right tool for the application that you're doing, and in turn you end up hurting your finger. So it's something to think about. Our own personal safety can also become part of this. Emotional and mental costs are also associated with clutter. So when we think about this, you might feel more anxious. As we talked, if somebody's coming to your house and your house is a mess, and do you get that anxiety? Are you embarrassed about that? So you may have some anxiety there. That overwhelming feeling that you've just lost control. Have no control over anything anymore. Might lead into some conflicts with other family members and those that you live with. So all of these things we want to think about and try to remember, as we go through this and we give you some ideas of how to become clutter-free, think back to what these affects. And this is not an exhaustive list. There's probably many other things that we could probably think of that come from living a life of clutter. So hopefully, as we continue, we'll give you some ideas to maybe eliminate some of these negative effects. Now, there may be some barriers that you might be thinking about. What's holding you back from getting rid of that stuff that keeps getting piled up on your counters or stacked in your garage or sitting on the floor waiting to be put away? What are those barriers? Okay, we probably all have different barriers that we are dealing with. But I bet that you probably, in your mind, think you have the perfect reason for not clearing out the stuff that you're not using. In your mind, it makes sense. So let's give you a second, and why don't you just think about, what are your barriers? Okay, what are some reasons that you are not getting rid of the piles that you have? Why are you not organizing the items that you have? These reasons all, again, might sound perfect to you. They make perfect sense. But since they're standing in the way of your living a more efficient life, let's try to turn that stinking thinking, as Zig Ziglar would call it, into stress-free, organized thinking. Okay, so we're going to go through a few slides here where we're going to kind of walk through maybe some of these common barriers. These may have been some of them that you thought of. They may not be what you thought of, but I want you to think about these as we go through. There may be some new ones for you to think of. One of the first barriers is, I might need it someday. We probably have all said this about something that we have. But we want to try to be honest with ourselves. Would you find it if you really wanted it and you needed it? Do you really have a place for it? Okay. So changing that into more organized way of thinking. My goal is to organize how I am living today, not tomorrow or yesterday. You need to think about today. So surround yourself with the things that you're going to need now. If you only needed it for one project a few years ago, is that project in your future again? If not, then you probably don't need to hang on to it. You probably bought it for that particular project because you needed it then, the moment that you were in. So, keeping things sometimes, can save us some money. But honestly, ask yourself, are you really going to need this in the future? We obviously don't want to be throwing away everything that we have so that we're rebuying everything all the time. But be truthful with yourself. Is this particular item something that I'm going to need in the future? Probably a reason, depending on what stage of life that we're in, we might use the reason, I'm saving it for the kids. You know what? Your kids are probably already overburdened by their own clutter or their makings of their own clutter. So don't save it for someday to maybe give to them. There may be things that you honestly want to pass on, and we get that. There may be family heirlooms that you want to make sure that you're saving, and maybe those are getting in the way. Maybe your children are at a point that you could start to pass that on to them. So be honest with yourself, even in that situation. Is it something that they will want? Is it something that they already have? The example I used of a family heirloom, probably not something that they already have, potentially. But if it's just that you're holding on to something that truly they already have, or something that they're not going to want, then don't hang on to it. But if it is those things that that they're going to want or they're going to need, consider giving it to them now. There's several reasons why you might want to do that. There's a value in being able to pass those items on to family, and being able to do that while the person is actually living actually carries on a lot of meaning to the person that's receiving the item. So maybe take that into consideration. Maybe the time's not now, but in the next year or two, I'm going to have these moments where I'm going to pass these items on. So think about your plan of, if you are saving stuff for other people, how is that going to look? Because if you're not, it's not something that they are going to be able to use, then let's go ahead and get rid of it. Okay? It's old and it's valuable. Well, let's think about this. Is it really valuable? Is it the value that you are putting on it? Could you find another buyer for it? Sometimes we hold value to items because they have an emotional attachment to them. The value that we might put on an item may not be the same value that the next person is going to put on it. So if this is an item that falls in that category that, really truly doesn't have real value, we might want to think about maybe, do we really want to hold on to it because we think we're going to get this large value out of it? An organized way to think about that, there's other ways we can get rid of things, and if we're wanting to recoup maybe some of that value. Maybe donating it to a charity and being able to make a tax deduction. If it's an item that, you truly think has some value, but you probably aren't going to get the money that you believe the item is worth, then maybe that's another way to think about it. You're still going to be able to get rid of it, and they might be able to find somebody that can utilize it, especially through a charitable donation. So sometimes we hold on to things, and they start to lose their worth and their value, and whether they're really good. So is this item that you're hanging on to, is it really something that you're going to use in the future? Is it something that you will use in the future? I think the image that we have on this slide is a good example that maybe some of us can relate to. A VHS player. At one point in time, yes, that was really a thing that most households had and needed. But with today's technology, is that something that we still need to hold on to? Now, there could be a place that you might have old VHS tapes and you want to be able to maybe convert those or be able to view those. And so I can see where maybe that could be. But there's probably some other examples that we could think of things that maybe in our eyes we think, well, it's still good. I don't want to get rid of it. But let's think in terms of maybe this technology example we're using here. Are we just taking up space for things that we really could use by hanging on to maybe an old VCR? Okay? And quite honestly, maybe this makes more sense to donate it to someone else as well. I'm too busy. When we think back to that quiz and maybe those barriers that we might have, one of them might have been that, I just don't have the time. I don't have any time for me, let alone take care of all this clutter that I've got in my life. Well, reality is you probably aren't as busy as you think you are. And the reality is, too, your clutter is probably costing you. Okay? Remember when we talked about, having all that clutter and you can't find what you need and you may go out and repurchase something you already have because you couldn't find it. That gives you that sense that you're busy. When in reality, you had the time, but you had to utilize it in an inefficient way. So decluttering will save you in the long run. It's going to take some time to maybe get yourself clutter-free. We're going to get into that here towards the end of this program. But that will assist you in having more time as you move forward. And one thing to kind of keep in mind, and a way to keep you organized, is find places for everything that you have. Have designated location, drawers, closets, wherever it might be. And when you're done using something, put it back where it belongs. Then you'll know where to find it the next time. And it's not out and in the way of those trip hazards that we talked about earlier. I don't know where to put it. We probably all have bought a few kitchen gadgets over the years, maybe. Or maybe some neat tools that, the time made sense. But then what do you do after you have so many different things that have at the end of the day, they can do the same thing as the one sitting next to them? How much space do we really have in our houses for all of these things? Okay? If you don't have the space, it's going to be disorganized. And then, is it really necessary? Do I need to have the same gadget that can do the same thing as this other one that I've had for 5 years? So be real honest with yourself. Granted, we know sometimes we get some of these things as gifts, but be honest with yourself if these are purchases that you are making. Do I have a specific use for this particular item? Do I have a specific place where I'm going to store this item? And am I going to be able to, as I said earlier, put these items back when I'm done so that we are able to find them the next time? Because just having a bunch of gadgets and, whether it's craft supplies or gadgets for the kitchen, whatever it is, you need to be able to have a way to keep all of that organized. Okay. So let's move into where we can talk about our minds can be connected to matter. If we think about this for a second, it might really help us as we start to put forth an effort to enable ourselves to be clutter-free. By viewing this program, you're putting your mind, you're taking that first step that I'm going to try to make some improvements. Let's see if we can help you start to develop an action plan. The first thing that when we think about our action plan, we want to envision how you want the space to look. Okay? What's your end goal? Make some rules for yourself. This is going to be a daunting task. And for us to say that we're going to try to accomplish something all in one day might be a bit much. So we may want to say that we're going to work on this over the course of the next week. Maybe it's over the next month. Or maybe you even need to give yourself a year, depending on what the process is. Be honest with yourself with what you feel is obtainable so that you can have those small victories that we're going to talk about. So action. The first thing you're going to want to think about is getting your plan, as we mentioned, in place, but maybe getting some supplies that are going to assist you with getting yourself organized. So first and foremost, we want to, anytime we're setting a goal, we want to kind of have it time bound, as I was mentioning, but schedule yourself also, not that I want to do this in the next week, for instance, But say, okay, on Saturday, I'm going to start on this project, and by next Saturday, I'm going to hopefully have things finished. So today, I'm planning, it's Saturday, I'm going to get all my stuff, I'm starting. You may have to be a day where you gather maybe some supplies like we see on this slide here, where maybe we have some boxes that we designate as these are the things I'm keeping, these are things I'm going to recycle, these are things I want to donate, and these are things they're just going simply to the trash. So once you have all of that, as I said, maybe start small. Don't overwhelm yourself by a large area that you're going to have to do. Okay? So start small and break that larger project into smaller projects. So maybe, as I said earlier, you're starting this week on a Saturday. By next Saturday, I want to have, a certain section of a room to be completed. And when you get to Friday of that week, celebrate. Allow yourself to have a victory that, hey, I've made it this far. Next week, I'm going to do the next section. Okay? But allow yourself to have those small victories as you go along. And so you want to have maybe some ground rules that you follow as you're going through trying to organize everything. These are some ideas that we have listed on this slide. You may want to make or add to this list some additional things that you want to take into consideration. So, for instance, is it broken? When we talked earlier about donating or, passing it on to someone else, well, if it's broken, it just simply goes to the trash, okay? Maybe you have duplicates of it. If you have more than one, okay, we can either donate it or we can give it to someone, a family member or something, if that is fine. Current, let's think back to that VCR again, that might still have a role, but there's new technology that we have now. Trade, and this may be something that you haven't thought about, but, is this something that maybe you could trade something that you have with someone else? We all have our own clutter, okay? Maybe, that the saying of one man's trash is another man's treasure. That's kind of what we're thinking here. There might be, but also think about this. We're not trying to just bring more stuff into our lives either, but maybe it's a tool that you have, not necessarily a duplicate. It's a tool that maybe you only use for one thing and you don't need it anymore, but you're in the market for another tool. Instead of going out and buying that tool that you're needing, maybe you have a buddy that you could switch with. Okay? Decorative. Is this something that I hang on to for that purposes? Is it replaceable? Missing it? When was the last time I used it? Can I locate it? Is this an asset? Am I obligated to hang on to this? And how much is this costing me? Kind of ask yourself those questions as you go through and you look at each item and decide, whether or not you want to hang on to it or what one of those boxes that you're going to put the item in. And as I said earlier, start small and build that momentum. If we look at this closet here, oh my, where do you start, right? Well, you start in a small. Maybe you take one of those little baskets at the top that appear they have some socks in them, and you start organizing those socks. Okay? Set yourself a timer. There's no harm in doing that either. I was talking in terms of days earlier, but maybe you set yourself a timer. I know for myself personally, if I set, or even if you have kids, and that's where I'm coming out with this, say just for 2 minutes. I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes, and I want you just to pick up and organize as much as you can in your room. Do that for yourself as an adult. Set yourself, 2 hours, 15 minutes, whatever it is. Start small, and you'll be amazed with what you can get done. You just stay focused during that time and work on trying to get those items organized. Okay, so now we're going to I encourage you to take the declutter challenge. Okay, we've talked about what clutter is and some of the barriers that we have, and maybe getting into organizing our clutter, but we want to really encourage you to take the declutter challenge. So I want you to think about this for a second. Where are you going to start? Okay, part of this program is to empower you to be clutter-free. So I want you to take a moment and think, where are you going to start? Okay. Why is this important to you? That important factor could be that you have a lot of family heirlooms that you want to pass on to your grandchildren. And it's important to you that you want them to receive and you to be able to tell the story behind that item. It'll be a nice transition for both parties, but then it's going to free up maybe that closet for you for maybe that craft hobby that you like to do now. Okay? Well, really want you to utilize the action steps that we were talking about. Okay? Set yourself a goal. Maybe it's in the next week. Maybe I'm going to think about doing this, and by next Saturday, I'm going to start. Okay? The other thing with action steps is I would encourage you to write those down. If you have a calendar, write it on your calendar. Maybe it is that each day you're only going to spend 15 minutes working on something. Write that on your calendar. Goal setting and writing your goals down is going to be more, you're going to be more efficient or more effective, in achieving that goal if you've written that down. Okay? And again, celebrate. So ask yourself, how are you going to celebrate? Okay? Maybe it is that you've been wanting to get a new craft item or want to start a new craft, a new type of project that you've never done, but you don't want to get started on it because you got too much stuff. Maybe that's how you celebrate. Once I have my closet cleaned out, then I can celebrate by starting up this new craft. So I really want to encourage you to try to empower yourself to be clutter-free. And I really do hope that you are willing to take down that challenge and that you will try to be clutter-free as you move forward. And if you have any questions as you go through this process, please feel free to reach out to the Extension office. We have some additional resources that maybe we could share with you that might assist you in your journey to be becoming clutter-free. And then with that, I would just like to ask if you have the moment and you would be so kind, we'd like to have a little survey that we would like to ask you to complete. You can see that listed on the slide here, or as you were probably directed to this video, that information was probably listed in probably a more efficient way, where you could just click on the link and to take that. And we greatly appreciate your feedback. And by all means, if I can be of any additional help as you start to become clutter-free, please reach out to me at the Jennings County Extension office. Thank you.